Good afternoon, and welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane's Book Chat Thursday edition. I am W.D. Foster Graham, the book review editor for Inside News, and I will be your host today. The Conversation with Al McFarlane provides robust, stimulating, inspiring, and informative conversations about all matters pertaining to the African American and African diaspora. We are currently well on our way to 2,000 subscribers. So if you are enjoying our content, please like and share and subscribe to our channel. And today, since it is Black History Month, it is my great pleasure to introduce contributors to the anthology Finding the Voice Within. Because, hey, you think Black History Month, the role of Black women in our history and past and present is a powerful one. It always has been and it always will be. And in sharing our stories, because we are storytellers, is crucial, is an integral part of our culture. Because if we don't share our stories, someone else will, and it may not be accurate. So, that being said, I'd like to also make an announcement of an upcoming event on Saturday, February the 22nd, 2025. St. Peter's AME Church will be celebrating its 145th church anniversary. And to kick off the event is our second annual We Are Wordsmiths community literary event. It runs from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. and St. Peter's AME is located at 401 East 41st Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 55409. So we will be featuring authors and poets who will be sharing their works and also selling their works, as well as jewelry by D. Michelle and artwork by Brother Vaughn Larry. And light refreshments will be served. So come on out and enjoy a literary feast. Now, to introduce our contributors for today's panel, Ebony Aya works at Macalester College as a program manager for the Jan Serrier Center for Scholarship and Teaching. She is a recent doctoral graduate from the University of Minnesota in curriculum and instruction with minors in cultural and teaching and African American studies. In her work, she focuses on the experience of Black women in higher education and centering African ways of knowing in our pedagogies. Additionally, she is the founder of the Aya Collective, a space that centers the expertise and experience of Black women in writing, and is the author of the published books Reconsidering Eve, Towards a Deepened Consciousness and Incomplete Stories on Loss, Love, and Hope, and recently launched Aya Collective's second anthology, Finding the Voice Within, and all books can be purchased at ayamediapublishingllc.com. Our next panelist, Sister Jaralyn Roberts, is a coach, writer, facilitator, and space holder who is passionate about using her own lived experience and gifts to hold space for others' healing, awareness, and self-discovery. She has facilitated many sessions and given talks around trauma healing, the power of self-discovery, and grief. She is also a leadership development professional that has trained, created, and managed leadership programs in both corporate and nonprofit sectors. Of all that she does, her favorite titles are wife and mother. She resides in the Twin Cities with her family, where she plans to continue investing in the healing, leadership, and liberation of others. And last but definitely not least is Sister Comfort Dondo. She is a passionate writer, speaker, and global advocate for women's healing. And as the founder of Fumulani, Minnesota African Women Against Violence, she champions survivor-led advocacy and culturally specific healing for gender-based violence survivors, particularly within African immigrant communities. And her work, deeply rooted in healing justice and cultural resilience, includes Finding the Voice Within with Aya Collective, a storytelling initiative empowering survivors. She is also developing a culturally specific workbook on child sexual abuse, prevention, and a self help journal for survivors, integrating traditional African healing methods with modern trauma recovery. Beyond writing, Sister Comfort is a recognized global advocate, speaking at United Nations forums and international conferences on survivor centered policies and holistic healing. Honored with the 2024 Women Lead Social Impact Community Leader Award, she continues to use storytelling as a tool for transformation, justice, and empowerment. Sisters, I welcome you to the conversation with Al McFarlane.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much.
It is definitely my pleasure. So, as today we're talking about finding the voice within. And so, Sister Ebony, I will start off with you.
Okay, I'm here.
So, okay, so tell us, what is the inspiration behind the book, or say the anthology?
So this is our second anthology. Aya Collective Publishing, formerly called Kinky Curly Theological Collective, got started in 2017. And as we started, my idea was to bring Black women together to write. And we did some initial performances in 2018 and published our first anthology, Let the Black Women Say Ashe, in 2022. And as we were publishing this anthology, I actually had a conversation with Mary Tyrus at Stride Publishing about the potential of bringing other Black women along to publish a second anthology, which is really how Finding the Voice Within was born, through a series of workshops that I did with Stride Publishing, leading them through my first book and workbook called The Gospel According to a Black Woman. And from that came this idea of wanting to put together an anthology. And so it was really just through conversation and collaboration with other Black women, other Black business owners, other Black writers who wanted to see a second book in writing and in print. So that's how it came to be, the idea of finding the voice within. The first book, Let the Black Woman Say Ashe, is about the affirmation that we give to each other. It's about how we validate each other as Black women and as Black people. And Finding the Voice Within is like about the internal validation and affirmation that we give to ourselves. I think so often we are looking for others to affirm us. And I think part of that is because we have been, as a people and as Black women, we have been criticized and put upon so much. And so we automatically begin to look and think for others to affirm, validate, speak life into ourselves. And Finding the Voice Within is about us actually taking the responsibility to do that for ourselves, how we are going to affirm, how we're going to validate, how we're going to lift up our own person so that we can be a blessing to other people and affirm and validate them as well. But that was how the book got started.
And indeed, that's something that's, hey, if it whatever's showing up in us is going to show up around us. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
And the thing is, those these are we have all these unique voices, and say in the present environment, fully in that's something that refuses to be silenced.
It won't be silenced. And it won't be silenced.
Mhm.
It absolutely won't. We've come too far, too far, been through too much to
Yes,
allow ourselves in this moment, in spite of all of the crazy things that are happening, to be silenced. We won't be. We refuse to be.
exactly. So now, when you're talking about finding the voice within, as the founder of Aya Collective, you know, when was it founded and how did it come to be?
So it was founded in 2017. I was a part of a healing fellowship with the local Black activist and healer, Dr. Joy Unlimited. And I remember having this project that I needed to do through her fellowship about putting a business plan together to bring people through a process of healing. And then I did it, and I sat on it for a while because I'm like, well, I don't know if this idea of bringing Black women to write will resonate with anyone else. But then, as God would have it, I got a second fellowship through the Cultural Wellness
Yeah.
Center for the
Yes.
Change Network of Minnesota that allowed me to actually put some skin and meat to this idea that I had. And so with just a small amount of money, I gathered 12 women together over the course of a year where we studied and wrote together. And so it was really other activists, other businesses, other Black people who saw the need for what I was doing, so to say, and invested in it, even if they didn't really realize that they were investing in it. But I want to give credit to where credit is due. I don't think we would be where we are right now as a collective without Dr. Joy's work or without the Cultural Wellness Center's work, because both of those organizations really helped me think about how I was going to move this work forward.
Indeed, indeed. What they say, we give credit where credit is due and give our flowers to people while they're here.
Yes.
And that is just so important. So, um, for me, I can get about having the focus and the primarily focus. For our viewers, why do you focus your work on primarily Black women coming together to write?
Because I was in in a former life, not too long ago, actually. So it wasn't that former ago. I was a licensed minister and preacher, went to seminary, have these degrees and all of the loan debt to prove I have the degrees,
Mm,
and found myself in church spaces where there just wasn't many opportunities for Black women to preach and teach. And so this was really about like giving us that opportunity and that platform to do that. And so I found myself blogging a lot, and I found myself wanting to preach. And I remember one time I was at this church, not the church I was attending, but another church. I won't say the name or the location so that you won't
mhm.
get it. The
Yeah.
pastor asked me, I will say that the pastor was white though. The pastor asked me to send him my sermon in advance. And I sent him my sermon. And he said that my sermon wasn't theologically fit for his congregation. And I went on to publish this series of blogs. I expanded the sermon, went on to publish these series of blogs that ended up getting me the opportunity to teach at Bethel a couple of times. And so
Mhm.
I really don't think it was my sermon. I think it was the pastor and him feeling some type of way. But I wanted to create a space for Black women where we didn't have to do that checking anymore, where someone wasn't surveilling and monitoring and watching our work and not giving us a space and platform to preach and teach or just write, because it's really not about it's not a theological organization. We started that way, but it's really about spirituality and creativity. I didn't want no one blocking us. I wanted us to be able to be as free and expressive as God has created us to be. And so I centered it on Black women because I know, like me, other Black women have been routinely silenced, not just in congregations, but in workspaces, in community spaces, in home spaces, in so many spaces. And so I wanted to create a space where we didn't have to worry about the silencing or the lids that people put upon us because of their own insecurities. I wanted us to be free. And in doing that, I wanted us to be clear about how we can partner with other organizations as needed. But I wanted to be unapologetic about my commitment to Black women. That I've had to bump heads with people around that from time to time who were like, well, why don't you make it BIPOC? Why don't you make it all women? Why don't you make it all Black people? All wonderful ideas, right? Like all of those ideas are wonderful. But when do Black women actually get to name and create a space that we're saying we're going to just be for ourselves, not to separate from other people? That's what Alice Walker says in Search of Our Mother Gardens. It's not so that we can separate. It's actually, we're doing this so that we can be better, so that when we do come together collectively in coalitions and collaborations, we've actually done the work to be here. And so that's why we focus on Black women. And I've had to maintain that. We're unapologetic about it. And then we partner in some really amazing ways with other organizations whose audience and focus is a little bit bigger. And it just really makes for really nice collaborations and partnerships. I also come from a nonprofit background before getting into higher ed, and I learned really quickly what lane I want to be in. And this is the lane, this is the work. And other people have other callings, and I'll partner with those people in those callings. But this is what I'm going to focus on.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, because you just spoke to something that's always been with me. Uh, one of my um, one of my authors that always inspired me is Toni Morrison.
Mhm.
And when she says, if there is a story you wish to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must be the one to write it. And she was questioned about her focus and her focus when her writing was, and her answer was just this: I write to Black women, and if other people like it, that's okay. She was definitely unapologetic about that fact. So,
Absolutely. And I feel like Black people, we in this country, we have not always been able to do that. And so when we do it, people get in their feelings.
mm-hmm.
The affinity spaces, people get in their feelings. People are in their feelings about DEI because, like, how dare you carve out a space, resources, time, opportunity just for you? And people will say that's reverse racism, that's racial discriminatory. No, it's actually strategic and it's absolutely necessary. But, people have different opinions about it. But we keep doing what we're gonna do.
There you go. There you go. And say, and that being said, because think you're not only a contributor as the founder, but a contributor. And so, kind of, I know we have Sister Jaralyn and we have Sister Comfort. So, tell us about a lot of the other authors who are the contributors, who
Yeah.
they are, and what they're writing about.
Sure. So I have the book right here in front of me, Finding the Voice Within. Shout out
Yes.
to Marcia Rowe for the beautiful cover design,
Mm-hmm.
who is a local artist. Um, we have 13 contributors, 13 total contributors, and two women who wrote the foreword to the book. Sister Comfort, who is on the call, as well as Elder Samarit, um, who wrote and participated in the forward, and which was a beautiful gift to me. I asked them if they would be willing to participate, and they both said yes, very enthusiastically. And then the other 13 women, I would say we came together over a period of about 18 months. I sent out a call maybe in, I want to say, December of 2022, a call in December 22 for people to submit ideas for the anthology. We came together over the course of 3 times between February and July of 2023. People submitted their final versions by December of 2023, just to outline the process.
Yes.
And there are some really beautiful contributions. And so Maya Mason is writing about hair, and I love it. It's an absolutely beautiful piece.
Yes.
She's talk about having lupus and what it means to lose your hair when, as Black women, we've been this idea of beauty has been attached to how long our hair is, what it looks like, what it functions like. Jamila Crawford is writing a collection of poems, which are really, really beautiful. At the beginning of each poem, she includes a scripture passage, which is really amazing. Holly Fiddler is also writing a collection of poems. Denise Walker writes about some of the silencing that she experienced as a young girl, and writes a letter to her daughters about overcoming that silencing. Jaralyn Roberts, who's also on the call today,
Yeah.
wrote this beautiful, I mean, like, I read this and I was in tears, writes this beautiful piece about her brother and the process of finding her voice again in this piece called Buried but Not Lost. Yolanda Mack, another amazing writer, writes this beautiful fiction story called The Return. Teresa Thompson Nix also writes another fiction story about the Sister Light Collective, and Maya finds her voice. Pamela Fletcher Bush, who's with the St. Paul Almanac, contributes a series of poems to this piece as well. Sister Peace writes a collection of poems that she and has in this book. Joy Marsh writes this letter reflecting on her relationship with her dad called The Good Daughter. I wrote a fiction piece that I started in 2022, finished in 2023, about my experience in grad school that I fictionalized in the furthest way possible. Like, there are elements of me that are here, and there are elements of other things that are here too.
Uh-huh.
We just wanted to communicate what that process is like for Black women trying to get their PhDs. Jean Lloyd, who was at our Sacred Saturday session last week, we hold a monthly session where Black women come together and write. And Jean Lloyd was our guest presenter last week. Jaralyn was our presenter in January. And Jean writes this story about her own life, and she calls it "How the Hell Did I Get Here?" And then Elder Amoke Kaba, a community elder and activist and artist, and so many amazing titles, writes this story called "A Crying Child." And then there's a conclusion that I write, kind of in dedication to my mother. But like this book, when I read the book as like going through and editing the pages and like making sure that we have commas where we need to have commas and periods where we need to have periods, that whole thing.
Yes.
Even though I'm not an editor, I'm like, I still, as someone who's responsible and a steward of the project, I still need to go through and do my own due diligence. As I went through this, I just felt this deep sense of, these are the stories that we as a people, we as Black women need to hear to heal ourselves from the wounds that we have endured over lifetimes.
Indeed.
And I was just so in awe. I was so in awe. The first time I read through the stories, I had COVID. And so when they first came in I think September 2023, I was reading them and I'm like, I might be delusional because I'm sick with the COVID, but these stories are amazing. And then when I read them again, I'm like, no, I wasn't delusional. These stories are absolutely just amazingly tender and what we need to hear right now.
And it's so much now more than ever, I will say that. Definitely. And so when it comes to the anthology, since we have Sister Comfort here, I know you wrote the foreword to the anthology, but I want to ask you some little questions first here. Now, you explore the power of storytelling in healing trauma. And that being said, how can reclaiming ancestral wisdom help both Africans on the continent and in the diaspora heal from historical and generational wounds? Because that is something that we all have gone through in some form or fashion.
Thank you so much. I want to say first, thank you to my sister Ebony, for leading this work, and thank you for making space for a lot of Black women. Let me start by rehashing what Sister Ebony shared around how we actually met. We met through the same fellowship, the Cultural Wellness Center. And I want to lift up the Cultural Wellness Center because the Cultural Wellness Center, for me, what it did was it decolonized my colonized mind as an African-born child who didn't understand that she was colonized. And when I realized that I was colonized, I also realized that the fight or the battle between the Africans on the continent and the African brothers and sisters whose ancestors were brought here over 4 decades ago was the same fight. But what the colonizers did was they dismantled the love we have for each other. So divide and rule, divide and conquer. And so I use that as a background of how spaces like finding the voice within continue to be created by leaders like Sister Ebony as a way of actually dismantling that divide, and why I'm involved in that work. So back to your question, how storytelling is important in healing trauma is that our people, especially if you look at Black women, we have been put in this perpetual state of survival. One friend of mine who's a therapist says it is like you have a lion on your lap. So I grew up where there's a lot of lions. And when I have a lion on my lap, my brain is constantly fight, freeze, or fight, flight, fight, freeze. It's the limbic brain system. There's no creativity. A lot of Black women were never given the chance to just be. Even to rest is a luxury, right? And so when we're in that state, how can we reclaim our ancestral wisdom through storytelling? How can we even reclaim that time to just the Saturday mornings where Sister Ebony creates space for Black women to just write? That itself is an act of resistance in my world, of the first step to reclaiming ancestral wisdom. I really believe that in even in the writing process, as a writer myself, I've been able to go back and ask questions to my mother, or go back and ask questions to my grandmother. But again, I think that is a gift that I hope to share with a lot of Black women, because our community has been systemically denied of that gift. Because again, we are put in the matrix where we are constantly feeling like we have lions sitting on our laps, figuratively,
Mm.
and our brains are not in the space where, Sister Ebony, what? You want me to show up every Saturday morning for 2 hours to write? I don't have time for that. You hear that a lot. I don't have time for that. And it's not a disrespect when people don't show up. But I think for me, what I've realized is actually it's a systemic way of keeping us on this hamster wheel, so that we cannot even be with ourselves and reconnect with our bodies, so we can start to reclaim some of those ancestral wisdoms that we definitely need to heal the generational trauma. Yeah.
You just gave me a very powerful visual. I'm sitting here thinking, lion on my lap. If I had a lion on my lap, I'd be freaking out. There would be no room for anything else. So, thank you for giving me that visual here. So, to get that perspective and stuff. And I see there's a quote you said, "I write what I like." Steve Biko said that. What does that mean to you?
I was listening to Sister Ebony speaking and sharing, and how people get in their feelings, and that's one of the books that I was just reading for the third time, I think. And Steve Biko, despite apartheid, he said, "I'm going to write what I like, whether you like it or not." So another act of resistance. So yeah, that's what that means to me. Mm.
Definitely. And so, when I'm asking Sister Jaralyn, hi, Dad, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what your anthology is buried, not lost. So, what has been the biggest change you've made since
Mhm.
losing your brother?
Yeah, so being a part of this anthology has just been a huge blessing for me. I know that I'm a writer, but this opportunity that Ebony gave me to be a part of this really for me solidified storytelling, the role that it plays in my life, and that I can do it. And so my piece is really about the idea, when somebody goes through a traumatic experience, a lot of times we hear people say, I lost my voice, right? What I'm saying is, you didn't lose it. It was just buried beneath all of the traumatic experiences, all of the things that the world puts on us, on who we should be and who we shouldn't be. But the truth of who we are, our true authentic voice, is always there, and it always has been there. And so it's really about healing process in order to get to that authentic voice. And so for me, I talk about the healing journey and the grief that I carried and still continue to carry around losing my brother in 2019, who was murdered, and he was 23. And so this piece is a really personal and vulnerable piece, but it is a story that a lot of, especially Black people, experience. And we're not always given that permission to talk about what that experience is like and what that healing process is like. And so for me, I think one of the biggest changes that I've made since losing my brother, and it may sound cliche, but we always hear tomorrow's not promised. But it was in that moment where I realized tomorrow really isn't promised. He was 23. He had two boys. Had dreams and goals, and it was snatched away so quickly.
Mm.
And so it was in that moment where I realized, wow, tomorrow really isn't promised. And so who am I today? Who am I in the context of all that has happened? And so really allowed me to make space for some real self-discovery work of who am I? What do I like? What don't I like? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And so since then, a lot of things have changed in my life. I work somewhere different. I do things differently. My circles of influence are different. I'm learning that no is a complete sentence, right? And so just learning boundaries and all these things about myself, because I realize that tomorrow it really can be gone. And so sometimes I say, my brother died, and so that I can live. And what I mean by that is, for so long we just kind of walk around just a zombie, right? Like we're just doing the things every day that we know we're supposed to do. We're being the people who other people say we are. We're not really taking the time to discover and explore our own dreams and futures and brilliance. And so it was that snap moment of him passing away where I was like, oh no, like I really
Mm.
need to take the time to live the life that I'm supposed to live, not the life that everyone else is telling me I'm supposed to live. So I would say probably that's like the biggest change in mindset, really.
Indeed. But you already answered my next question. So I want to go to one more, and then we're going to go to sharing excerpts from this anthology of this powerful work.
Yeah.
So, Sister Jaralyn, what practices have been most helpful and not helpful for you as
Mm.
you've been journeying through your healing process?
That's a good question. I think for me is I still have some, I'm working on it, but I had a bad habit of like shoulding, right? Like I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be doing this. There's an expectation around grief, and I think in society where after a certain amount of time, okay, you're supposed to just move on. But there might be a song, a moment, or whatever that brings up a wave of grief for me. And so instead of being like, um, I shouldn't feel this way. It's been X amount of years. And so I shouldn't allow this grief to come up, or I shouldn't cry, or why am I sad by now? It's just, no, like the practice of just allowing myself to be whatever comes up for me has been so helpful, and just acknowledging the feelings and the humanity, especially of us as Black folks as we're grieving. There's this like unrealistic expectation of like, oh, Black people are so strong, they don't need to feel. Like, no, we have feelings. And I feel very deeply. And so when those waves of grief come, I think allowing those things to come, and then also like not letting others dictate what my grief looks like, but me checking myself and not dictating what others grief looks like, because I think there that could be a habit as well. And so that's a practice that doesn't work. When I try to dictate what other people's grief look like, or how they deal with their grief, or what that looks like, that is not helpful, and that is not helpful to me or nor anyone else. And so I would say that's a practice. The other thing I would say is just somatically being in my body and really knowing what the grief feels like, where I feel the grief, and crying. Like there's times where I might cry. I don't even know I'm crying. Okay. But I know that I have a cry in my spirit that needs to come out, and I'm going to cry that thing out. And sometimes I truly believe like my tears aren't for me, but I may be crying for someone else who is not able to. And so just somatically being aware of my body, the feelings in my body, the sensations that grief brings in my body, allows me to really work through it, and let those emotions pass versus holding on to it. Because when we hold on to things and we don't allow those things to come out, they manifest physically too. And so, how do we give ourselves permission to not only heal spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, but physically through those same practices? So, I would say those are like some practices that have been really helpful.
I can appreciate that, especially when we live in this society where men aren't supposed to cry. And so then, but me, I know, I remember, I love Aretha Franklin, the queen and stuff. So, but when she died, I cried for 3 days. And with that, and same thing with my mother passed away in 2023. You know, I get where I can relate, because all of a sudden, no, some things would hit me right away. They didn't happen at the time of her homegoing, but it happened maybe months later, and when it just hit, it hit and stuff. So I thank you for that insight on that.
Yeah. And can I just add too, like allowing ourselves to grieve things beyond people is
Mhm.
really important. So maybe there's dreams that you're grieving, maybe there's moments or conversations, or just that grief goes beyond just like losing a loved one. Whatever, you might grieve what you thought your life might be that it's not, or you know, a place you wanted to go that you never got to go. Like grieving is, so we box it in, and I think there is power in allowing yourself to grieve things outside of just losing loved ones.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the added insight for that. Now, so far as sharing, I'll start here since Sister Comfort, you did the forward. We'll start with you, and then Sister Jaralyn, and Sister Ebony, since you're going to do the conclusion, you will wrap it up.
Thank you so
So,
much. Awesome. All right. I will share part of the forward here. It's titled "The Sister Speaks." In the heartfelt anthology "Finding the Voice Within," the authors, through the lens of a poignant proverb in my mother's tongue, which is Shona, invited me into a world where the act of crying is not a sign of weakness, but a profound testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The proverb says, Mwana asingachemi anofira mumbereko, echoes through these pages as a reminder that a child who does not cry may bear the weight of his struggles in silence on his mother's back. I think that's it. That's a lot to what we were talking about. Um, as I was reading through these beautiful 13 stories, this was really hard for me to read because I could see each one of the sisters' stories in my own, vice versa. And as I was reading each one of them, and some of the sisters I know personally, um, this proverb around the child who does not cry will die on his mother's back, the breaking of silence, the shattering of silence, is why I wrote part of this forward, because for me it kind of embodied the themes that I saw in this beautiful book. Um, I will end with reading one of the stories that I highlight. Reading through Sister Holly Fiedler's collection of poems touched a raw nerve. For me, her analogy of eggshells is a symbol of avoidance, and the sharp cuts from these shells represent the detrimental effects of not facing one's giants. As the youngest child in my family, I was assumed to be the strongest and a provider. The struggles Sister Holly articulated on the pages spoke to me as I reflected on my experience. Ebony Aya's narrative, "She was always here," compelled me to break my silence for the first time and courageously challenge the stigma around mental wellness. In sharing their collective stories, the authors unveiled a tapestry of vulnerability and strength. Their words are a powerful force that can encourage us to confront our own giants, embrace our tears, and acknowledge the resilience it takes to navigate life's challenges. So, as you embark on the emotional journey through finding the voice within, may you find solace, kinship, the courage to face your own silent cries. This anthology represents a collection of powerful women who, in penning their stories, have collected to their deepest truth and unearthed a process of healing that can inspire us all for generations to come. Thank you.
thank you, thank you, thank you, Sister Comfort. Sister Jaralyn.
Yes. So the piece that I'm going to read from my section of the book is a little context. I detail out the day that my brother passed away, and now I'm talking about some life lessons that I'm learning through grief. And so this particular part is about peace. So peace is one of the concepts I learned during the season. In spite of feelings of anger, disappointment, hurt, pain, sadness, and grief in this season, there is still peace. I know this may sound confusing and have you scratching your head. It's even harder for me to understand and articulate. Even with all the tragedy, trauma, and drama deep down in my heart, I do feel a sense of peace that I can't explain. For me, I am convinced it is my faith that informs and sustains my peace. We all desire peace in the depths of our hearts, no matter what road we travel. We search so desperately to find it in places, other people, books, music, art, energy, movement, scenery, God, anywhere and everywhere. We are all knocking on the door, asking if there is a space where we can feel a peace that surpasses the brokenness of this world, of our circumstances, of our hearts. Many of us imagine that when we obtain this peace that seems impossible to grasp, that everything will be pleasant. We believe we will feel inspired, experience pure joy, become enlightened, and receive satisfaction of our life lining up with our believed and perceived purpose. Or maybe we imagine walking in nature, singing, and dancing freely without a care in the world. We imagine everyone in and out of our care circles is well and all the needs are being met. We all have an idea of what it means to have peace. But why does it seem so impossible to obtain? Why do we spend thousands of dollars on others to show us where to find this peace or to discover the magic formula so the peace we all imagine will manifest? Or we lose hope in the existence of peace altogether because it seems like the shelf it sits on is too high for our reach, no matter how much help we try to get. Whatever belief or faith you subscribe to, I believe a change in mindset amid the pain will make space for peace we all desire. I'm discovering in this season that we get to have peace and pain, both and, not peace or pain, either or. Peace is not the absence of pain, but the ability to believe in greater hope and purpose in the midst of it. Peace exists in our understanding and in our hope despite our circumstances and the brokenness that shows up in our lives. I've begun to approach peace and reimagine what it looks like in the midst of my pain. I found that I need to stop searching for peace outside of myself, but instead see peace as a state of being that comes from a larger understanding of my purpose. I understand now that peace is not realized in the absence of pain, but it coexists with all of the emotions that come from living in a broken world. The peace we desperately desire doesn't exist in unreachable places, but among all the dreaded realities and truths about ourselves and our lives. We must face what we dread, but we often avoid working through so we may finally get the peace that lives at the center of healing, grace, and accountability. I encourage you to start the search for peace by not searching for it in external things. Instead, face yourself and work through the hard things to uncover peace that already is yours amid the pain. And as we do the deep heart work, we will begin to feel the presence of peace in our hearts. Remember, it's not an either or, it's a both and. Give yourself love and grace through the process. None of us have arrived, and we all experience pain, but I pray our eyes will be opened in the midst to see the light in the darkness. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Sister Jaralyn. Sister Ebony.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to be reading from the conclusion. And Jaralyn, I so appreciate what you said about grief before you read your piece. And you talked about grief isn't just the process of losing someone. In this piece, I'm talking about grief and grieving my mother who has dementia, and not just grieving the fact that she has dementia, but grieving the potential lost life with the way that she's lived over the course of her life. So I'll read it. And I just wanted to say that grief is so much more than a physical, tangible loss to eternity. It is so much a part of our lives. And I think as Black people who've experienced so much, we don't always name the fact that we're not just grieving death. We are grieving all of the things that have happened and continue to happen that we don't always have names for. And I feel like that makes it into the book and is a part of the piece I'm going to read. I'll stop preaching and I'll actually read now.
Hey.
I can't get away from it. I'm sorry. Conclusion. At the time of this writing, my mother is living with dementia. It's been about 2 years since her diagnosis, a 2-year journey fraught with complications, false starts, and so many other things in between. This is because caring for her has been quite the challenge, not only because we live in 2 different states, but because she has particular needs that I do not always know how to navigate. Care for her is just one part of the struggle for me. The other part of the struggle is the grief that I walk around with daily, not only of her getting older, but the life lost as she succumbs to this disease at an age that feels so early to me. I do not want to compare her to others. Still, I cannot help but think that about other 70-year-olds in my family, my community, and across society who are thriving in ways she is not. It doesn't feel fair to me that she, this woman I love so much, has to spend the rest of her life living this way, deteriorating with each and every passing day. My heart breaks daily over the prospect of placing her in a long term care facility. It feels more permanent and exacting than caring for her in her own home because I know that on the other side of that care facility is eternity. I just don't feel ready for that to be the case. I don't feel ready for my mother to enter eternity because parts of me still grieve the person that she could have been. I grew up watching my mother excel in her work, even though she only had a few college courses under her belt. I saw her get a home that we own remodeled entirely and paid for by the government with grants and other programs. And all these years later, I still ask how, and I'm trying to figure out how those resources might still exist. I experienced her raise my sister and me on 37th and Lisbon in Milwaukee, Wisconsin during the 1990s, in a home that was shot up so many times I had nightmares in my early 20s. Despite the horror surrounding us, she fiercely protected and provided for us. When it was time, she moved us away from that space to a marginally better neighborhood. This is all to say that I saw what she was capable of. When I graduated from high school and came to Minneapolis for college, I remember holding such deep pride over what she could accomplish with relatively few resources. But I also remember from the time that I was 14 being absolutely heartbroken over the deep sense of pain that was in her heart as a result of what she experienced in this world. It was a hurt that I felt did not propel her forward and cause her to fight against all odds, but a hurt that made her more and more of a recluse and eventually made her sick. You see, her pain, while completely legitimate, was something she allowed to paralyze her into inaction, particularly after my sister and I were out of the house. From the ages of 50 through 70, I watched her decline a little more each year as she insisted on isolating and withdrawing from the world, lest anyone else cause her pain. Unfortunately, I believe that her isolation not only made her sick, but it also caused her to shrink back from the purpose and plan that I believe the divine had for her life. 72 years, and I pray she have many more years with her. I cannot change the trajectory of her life. I am not God, and that is not my job, but by God. There has to be more for her, more peace, more love, more joy. I guess what I want for her is that when she gets to eternity and looks back over her life, that she knows beyond a shadow of a doubt she accomplished what she came to do. And that despite the hurt and pain, her existence wasn't in vain. I wish this for my mother whenever she is ready to join the land of the ancestors. And I wish that for all of us. I wish that each of us, bearers of God's light, can ultimately live up to the potential that is inside all of us. I pray that each of us, whether we are called to be painters, musicians, estheticians, writers, doctors, preachers, teachers, bankers, carpenters, mechanics, nurturers of our families and communities, activists, storytellers, or whatever else, can realize who we were destined to be so that in God's time, when we join the land of the ancestors, we can cross over with no regrets. When I think about the collection of stories in this book, Finding the Voice Within, I think about a collection written by fiercely talented Black women who are strengthening their voices so that we can. I think about writers working to not allow the barriers erected by oppressive institutions, systems, and individuals to keep them from articulating a vision of the world the way it could be and living into that vision. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, these women are healers and visionaries. They are who we need to rectify the pain and hurt that exists in the world. Their words are anointed, and their embrace is full of sweet richness that can strengthen the weary hearted with the nary a word. I'll leave it there.
Whoa.
Mm.
Wow. Oh. Yeah. Hey, viewers, you heard it here. See, without a test, there is no testimony. and each contributor has shared a testimony. Now, I'm going to ask a question that I do ask all of my authors, poets, and writers. And my question is this: what advice would you give to your 13-year-old self from where you are now? Any one of you can start.
That's a really hard question. So for me, there's so many things I would say, but I think one of the things when I think about my 13-year-old self is that you are uniquely you, and you are here at this time for a reason. You are created with purpose, on purpose, for purpose. So don't try to be anyone else. I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to find my identity instead of leaning into my God-given identity. And so, yeah, just walk in your purpose and everything will work out. You'll find your way.
Yes. Sister Comfort, Sister Ebony.
I can go. I was trying to think where I was geographically at 13. I was in Zimbabwe, but everything in me wanted to run away from home because of some pain that was at home. And I think when I call back the 13-year-old self, I would say, um, you can't really run away from your shadow. Um, you have to revisit that part of you that where the pain was, and bring it back to you. And I think the other part that I would talk to my 13-year-old self is, learn to have more grace. Learn to have more grace with yourself. Lots and lots and countless numbers of having grace, failing, but continue to have a lot of grace and love for yourself, is what I would do to nurture my 13-year-old self. Because as a young woman, who came from a lot of competitive background, there was a lot of overachieving without grace, and not taking enough time to celebrate the accomplishments, but then heading on to the next accomplishment without the grace. So grace would be the theme for my 13-year-old self. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Ebony.
So when you asked that question, tears welled up in my eyes. 13, 14 was hard for me. It was super, super hard for me for various reasons. And so I don't know if I have advice for my 13-year-old self, but what I would tell my 13-year-old self is that you are loved. Fiercely, unequivocally loved. You are loved, you belong, and you are accepted. I would want my 13-year-old self to know that, and the piece about grace, yes, but that you are loved. And you don't have to carry other people's pain to prove that you are loved. I was carrying a lot of people's stuff that I had no business carrying. So I guess maybe the advice is put that shit down. That's not yours.
Yeah.
But survival mode, right? 13-year-old. We're trying to survive this world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't realize that it's not your job to carry other people's emotional baggage. That you start trying to figure out your hormonal stuff. Like you do that and put that other stuff to the side. And so, but I think on top of that you are so loved. You are loved. Yeah.
Amen. Amen,
Mm-hmm.
Sister Ebony.
Thank you.
And that's when I think about this anthology and stuff. Well, after I read it, I'm a guy who loves to read, and I won't stop till I get to the end, cover to cover. But then this proverb came to my mind, so I'd love to have each your individual take on it. And it says, "Until the lion shares its side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter."
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your take?
I'll start. So I'm from Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee, but I'm never moving back to Milwaukee. That's how I feel about it. And years ago, this man named Matthew Desmond wrote this book called Evicted about
Mm.
for like housing in Milwaukee. And in order to do it, and foreclosure in these Black women, predominantly Black women. So he profiles the Black side of Milwaukee and the white side of Milwaukee to tell this story. And I remember seeing, and it's such a fabulous book. But one of the things that I remember feeling as I was reading and then had an opportunity to hear him speak is like, we've been saying these stories for years. We've been telling these stories for years. And it took someone white with a PhD in sociology for the stories that Black Milwaukeeans have been telling about housing to be heard, and it hurt. And I think it was one of the other things that continued to reify the reasons why I wanted to start this company and why I focused on Black women telling our own stories in my research, because there are going to be white guys with PhDs or some other credential, like all of these different fields that were founded that come and study the Black people without us given the opportunity to tell our own stories. It makes me, so you opened up a can of worms, this quote. So when I think about W.E.B. Du Bois and Mervo Herskovits, and Mervo Herskovits is this Jewish guy who was writing about Blacks in the time that W.E.B. Du Bois is writing about Blacks. Comfort, remember this class where we learned this piece all these years ago in this class that we were taking at the same time at the U.
Yep.
And Mervo Herskovits has gets funding to write about Black people.
Yep.
W.E.B. Du Bois has to go to Ghana to write about us and dies in Ghana. So when I think about the lion, like, this is the whole reason I do this work, because there are too many people who are not us writing about us. And I don't mean that they're being full of deceit and maliciousness, because like I said, Matthew Desmond's work is great. Mervo Herskovits' work is great. But it's not us. It's not us taking the time to write and to pen. It's not us whose stories are being bought en masse. It's not us whose stories are being validated as truth. And so for me, that's why I do the work I do. I'll keep going, but I will stop so that other people can answer this question. But you can see you struck a nerve with your question.
Okay. Well, I think about that things when I'm writing my own novels that say, hey, I'm gonna be a lion.
Yes.
and I have lionesses right here on the show. Does either of you want to add to that?
Yeah, I could just add too. In my piece, I also talk about, like, it's about perspective, right? And everybody has their own side of whatever story, and only having one side is never going to be the complete story. And so I have this line in my piece that I talk about, I'm going to be the villain in someone's story, and I just have to be okay with that, right? And because I spent so much time doing things that I didn't want to do so that other people would see me as, like, the good person, right? And I was terrified of being the villain in somebody's story. But the thing is, like, people are going to make and share their side of the story or what they believe the truth, regardless of what I do and regardless of what I try to bend myself and break myself and all these things to fit so that I'm looked at in this beautiful light in everyone's story. And that's just not going to be the case. And so I'm coming to a point where, like, I might be the villain in someone's story. Everybody's not going to want to, people are going to misunderstand you because they are determined to misunderstand you. And that's just is what it's going to be. And so as I lean more into that, I am becoming, one, more comfortable telling my own truth, but two, being comfortable being not everybody liking me. And that's okay.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sister Comfort.
Okay, so I'm going to share a story about a real lion. A few years ago, I interviewed a beautiful sister. Her name is Tendai, and she was attacked by a lion while she was coming from fetching firewood, carrying a baby on her back. I'll shorten the story for the sake of time. Tendai survived the lion attack because she used some of her ancestral wisdom that her great grandfather, who was a hunter, had taught her. That number one, if you meet, and I grew up hearing this as well in Africa growing up, if you meet a lion, God forbid, you have to look them straight in the eye,
Mhm.
because when they look into our eyes, they see fire, just like we see fire in their eyes, so that terrifies them. Tendai would share with me why she thinks she survived. She said, I survived because of my great grandfather. I said, is he still alive? She said, he taught me this trick of looking in the lion's eyes. And each time she did that, the lion would pour sand into her face so that she cannot see. And when she puts her head down, the lion would throw its claws on her back. And the lion never touched the baby, the child, because the child was just staring at it. Why do I share this story? If Tendai didn't survive to share her story, I would never have these tools where I to meet the next devourer, where I to meet the next, where I to be prey to lion. And I think this goes on to our community, because we have lived to survive. We've survived, sorry, and lived to tell the stories of our ancestors, of our great grandmothers, Sister Ebony, of your mother, the stories of some of our ancestors who were not able to be given the ability to even write, or even read. I think this proverb really resonates with me in the importance of continuing to tell our own stories and continue to reshape the narratives, and not ever let the hunter get away with a trophy without us telling our side of how we fought back or how our ancestors fought back. I just thought I would share that story. It will live with me into the other side, because that was a powerful, powerful testimony of a survivor, who survived a lion attack and lived to tell how she did it. So, yeah.
Indeed,
Mm.
I could easily have this conversation for another hour, but since I could definitely I'd love to have another more conversation. So, but in conclusion, here, where can our viewers and readers purchase Finding the Voice Within?
So we prefer that you purchase it directly on our website at ayamediapublishingllc.com. Again, that's AYA Media, MEDIA, Publishing, PUBLISHING, LLC.com, Aya Media Publishing LLC.com. You can also find a link at ayacollectiveandmen.com. And so, I mean, you could purchase it on Amazon if you want, but it does cut our profits and how we're able to share those profits with the writers and the community. So we prefer that you publish it get it on our website. You can also, if you're local in Minneapolis, pick up the book at Strive Publishing, which is downtown on Nicollet Avenue. So those are the two places. Buy it online at our website, iamediapublishingllc.com, or get it from Strive Publishing. Those are the two best ways to purchase the book.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to thank you, Sister Ebony, Sister Jaralyn, and Sister Comfort, as part of the Aya Collective for today's show. I thank you for all of the voices that you bring and the authentic truths and healing that you share.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm so honored.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us to be here.
Thank you. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane on Book Chat Thursday edition. I'm W.D. Foster Graham, your host today, and we'll see you on the next go round.